Well, hey there kids, it's your good buddy Uncle Ben, and I'm here today to tell you guys about the awesome show that I'm playing this weekend, and also give you all a little bit of insight about all the work that goes into playing a cool guy concert. I just landed myself a gig playing at VGM Con in Minneapolis with none other than the Hit Points. Longtime watchers of my channel have heard me talk about the Hit Points before, but if you're not aware of who they are, they're a group based out of Nashville that does classic video game covers with traditional bluegrass instrumentation. So we're talking about fiddles and banjos and acoustics, all the classic peepaw instruments. I first became aware of the Hit Points about a year and a half ago whenever I was introduced to them by my good buddy Andy Wood, who, by the way, Andy has been putting up some awesome lesson material over on his channel, so be sure to go check that out and subscribe. And it wasn't long after that that Andy got in touch with Matt and Eli, the banjo and fiddle players in the group, and started recruiting them into his live band, and we have played all over the place together and become like best buds in the universe since then. We've also gotten to collaborate on a bunch of music since then too, with Matt playing banjo on Andy Wood's last record, Junktown, and myself, Andy, Matt, and Eli also did that cool cover of Wicked Child from the Castlevania soundtrack back in October. So here recently the Hit Points were offered an opportunity to play at VGM Con, which is a big video game and music convention in Minneapolis. But the only problem was that their upright bass player that they usually play with live already had some commitments in place, so he couldn't make the show. And so they reached out to me. So considering I was going to be working on so much cool music that I wanted to share with you guys anyway, I thought I would bring you guys along for the ride and show you how I get ready for a big gig like this one. Oh hey there kids, before we get any further into this video, let me tell you guys about something really cool. It's called patreon.com/Ben Eller Guitars. It's the best place on the entire internet to go if you like my channel and want to show some support. Plus, if you become one of my patrons, even at the $1 a month level, you gain access to all kinds of downloadable tabs, charts, backing tracks, bonus lessons, and so much more. This week I'm going to be uploading some pictures of the charts and stuff that I made to help me get through this gig so you guys can get a little bit of insight about what I like to stare at whenever I'm playing a show and don't have songs memorized yet. I always find looking at other people's charts is really interesting because it's kind of like looking at somebody else's version of an instruction manual of how that song goes. So this might give you some cool insight into the inner workings of my brain pan. Plus it might just save your neck if you ever find yourself, playing bass for the Hit Points. It happened to me, it could happen to you. So be sure to head on over to patreon.com/Ben Eller Guitars, sign up and start reaping the benefits today. Thanks. Step numero uno, get the set list. The first thing that I always do whenever I pick up a gig like this is get in touch with the artist and find out what the set list is going to be for the shows that we're playing. Matt and Eli got right back with me and let me know that we'd be performing 9 songs off of the debut album, which you can find on Spotify and iTunes and all that stuff, as well as 3 new tunes that they're not put out yet. They sent me those in the form of demos and a couple of live recordings you guys can find from their set at MagFest this year. So now that I knew the set list, it's on to step number 2, the playlist. The absolute most important part of prep for any gig that I ever do is to immediately go on, Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, and make a playlist of all the material that I've got to learn and just start listening to it obsessively. Of course, I've only been using Spotify for a couple of years, so back in the day I would have to make like a big iTunes playlist and put it on my iPod, or even further back, like go and make a bunch of, burnt mixed CDs and stuff like that and just listen to those in my car all the time. But even if you don't use a subscription music service like Apple Music or whatever, there's always a way around this. You can make a YouTube playlist of all the songs that you've got to learn that only you can access and go through that all the time. Of course, you have to deal with like the advertisements and all that stuff, but that's the price you pay for free. For all of those demos or live recordings that they sent me of the new material that's not on Spotify yet, I just make a Dropbox folder and stick those in there. That way I can access it from my phone and listen to those new tunes anywhere I go. And then we get to the hard part, which is also the fun part, which is transcribing, charting, and learning these tunes. There's a lot of really cool things in these tunes, so I'm going to be showing you guys some of my favorite parts about them as I go through and learn them here on the old big guitar. Let's talk about an old classic on here, the athletic theme from Super Mario World, originally for Super Nintendo. Every time I hear that tune, I think about the Christmas where my brother and I got our Super Nintendo, which included Mario Paint and Super Mario World. We proceeded to spend the next, probably like 20 hours straight just wearing those games out. In addition to the basically flawless play controls and level design and stuff, this game also just featured a fantastic soundtrack. And some of it is kind of influenced by bluegrass and swing music. And a lot of that is kind of exemplified in this tune, because even the kind of the B section of the song, the one that features like A7 going to D7, G7 to C, that's essentially the changes in like Sweet Georgia Brown. It starts on the 6 as a dominant, then it goes to the 2 as a dominant, the 5 as a dominant, then the 1, and kind of cycles around that. That's a tune that a lot of gypsy jazz guys play, but a lot of you guys might also know it as like the Harlem Globetrotters theme. That's what they're always coming out to. And you know, obviously the original recording is played on an upright bass, and I'm playing a sideways bass. But there's a few things that I like to do to try to make it sound like that big, fat, warm, upright tone. One of those being left-hand muting. It's actually a trick that I picked up from Rocco Prestia, who's one of my favorite bass players. He plays for the band Tower of Power. But one thing that he does a lot of times just to get more control out of the strings, keep them from vibrating around too much while he's playing fast 16th note stuff, as well as just give it more of that big, fat, subby, muffled tone, is to actually mute in front of the fretted note with left-hand fingers. It's almost like what guitar players do when we, palm mute back here, only we're doing it on this end of the string instead. So here's what it would sound like if I played it without the muting. And here's how it'll sound if I do it with the fret hand muting. This is a really great way to achieve that sound, to get things a little bit subbier and tubbier. Next one I'm working on here today is Those Who Fight, which is one of the battle themes from Final Fantasy VII. Easily in my top 3 video games of all time, originally released for PlayStation a million years ago. By the time this video comes out, that Final Fantasy VII remake demo is already going to be out, and I don't have any current generation consoles anymore. Like the newest thing I have is a PS3, so I can't play it. So it's absolutely breaking my heart. So please let me know in the comments if it's as awesome as what I want it to be, because the original is one of my treasures of being alive. And part of the reason for that is because the soundtrack to this game is so freaking good, it's ridiculous. They're all just completely awesome pieces of music that get stuck in my head all the time, which makes sense considering I've invested hundreds if not thousands of hours of my life into playing that game. I have one save file that has everything maxed out, everybody's HP, everybody's level, all the master materia, the clock in the game is maxed out. Pretty ridiculous stuff. Again, that's basically all that I did before I started playing music, was play video games and draw superheroes. Yay for homeschool. None of the individual parts in this song are particularly hard to play, but the difficulty is that there's just so many segments to it, and a lot of weird key changes and stuff too. But because I have spent, again, hundreds of hours of my life listening to this song, it's not too big of a problem. Through one of the first ones that I know absolutely nothing about, which is Talia's theme from League of Legends. I literally have no idea what kind of game this is. I'm old. So this is again one of those tunes where the original bass recording really takes advantage of the fact that you can play an upright bass with a bow for those long sustaining notes, and also that nice kind of volume swell that you can do whenever you're playing a bowed instrument. You can achieve similar kind of swelling sounds like that to imitate string sections with your guitar or your bass using a volume pedal, but I'm packing super light for this gig, so I gotta be doing all those little swells and stuff just right here on the bass, just simply striking the note and then rolling the volume up for those more, kind of upright bass or cello-like tones. Love this changes. just kind of swelling them in, you know? It's challenging too because it has some melodic parts in it. Man, sections like that would sound so great with that really smooth kind of slide in and vibrato that you can get with the fretless. I really need to get me one and just let my inner Jocko run free. Just to give you guys an idea of what it's like and the kind of workload you take on whenever you do a gig like this, we are currently in sunny Orlando, Florida, playing the Planes, Trains, and Barbecue Fest with Kennedy Wood Band, which is our little Southern rock outfit. Beautiful, gorgeous day. I'm in our hotel surrounded by gorgeous vintage Les Pauls. And meanwhile, I'm ignoring that stuff because I'm over here in my little zone of charting destruction, working through all these tunes. Honestly, I probably won't end up using most of these charts. Some of them I will rely on for the really complex tunes like Double Dragon and stuff right here. But a lot of times simply just the act of writing stuff out, you know, even if it is in my own dumb chart language and stuff, is enough to help me get stuff memorized. So a lot of times I'll do this even when it's not necessarily something I need. I think it's worth noting too that everybody kind of does their charts differently, you know, and I don't think you should have any kind of like pressure to make your charts look like somebody else's or whatever. The important thing is that it's in a language that you understand, with words like pump or groove to clue you in as to what's going on. I always use little symbols like the diamond right there, just let me know that's a long sustained note. Stuff like that. I can just make it so that you're sure that you will understand what you meant in the heat of battle. Well, it is now a couple days out from the show. It is extremely late. I am a little buzzed and have a little bit of a headache, but these tunes ain't gonna practice themselves, so here we are. And allow me to state the obvious. I'm currently working through Dance of Pails from the Castlevania Symphony of the Night soundtrack, which is maybe my all-time favorite game and definitely my all-time favorite game soundtrack. The soundtrack of this game is just absolutely flawless. I'm obsessed with it. And this is probably my favorite song on the soundtrack, and the Hit Points version of it is so freaking cool, and it's got this middle section in there that is not on the original version of the tune that was written by the banjo player Matt Menefee. It's got all these diabolical arpeggios. It's so cool. I've got to learn it on guitar. I'm sure it'd be like a cross-picking, you know, nightmare to work through. But during this section, the bass part is just kind of embellishing on the chords, and then later jumps in and plays the melody, which is really strange because it's going on over these very bizarre chord changes. The entire song is kind of based on that like minor major 7 sort of tonality. Kind of James Bond sound, which I love. So the melody is appropriately weird to follow those chord changes. One of my favorite tunes that we're doing in this set is one that I had never heard before, which is the Rocket Hideout from Pokemon Red and Blue. Pokemon is one of those things that I never really got into because it started getting popular like right when I started playing guitar, which is kind of when I started fading out from playing video games just because I didn't really have time. So I'd never heard anything off of the soundtrack before, but this tune is really freaking awesome. It's all roughly based around E, but it's got all these weird like chromatic and like synthetic scale things in it that just make it really strange and unpredictable. Even though it's got kind of a lot of parts in here and they're all based around these weird chromatic themes and stuff, it was actually easy to memorize just because it's so much different than the other tunes. reckon I'm one of them Pokemon masters. Up next, we got another classic from yesteryear. This is Green Hill Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog. So, confession time, I've actually never owned any Sega system of any kind. I always had friends that had them, and I'd go over to their place and I'd play Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic the Hedgehog. That's about it. This song just has a lot of straight 8th note kind of bass parts in it, so it's kind of boring, but come on, I gotta include it. So this tune brings me to another point I want to talk about whenever you're taking on like a hired gun kind of gig, which is always ask if they do things differently on the record than they do live. At about 1:45 into this song on the album, there's kind of this free time part where everybody goes really chill and relaxed and plays really loosely and stuff. But after checking out some of the recent live videos from them playing at MagFest in early 2020, I checked out the version of this song live, and they use this section as a bass solo part. So this is one of those scenarios where, you know, if I'd have never taken the extra effort to go and check out, yeah, this is how, you know, they sound on the record, but how do they do it live, I would have shown up at the gig and fallen, you know, flat on my face whenever it got to that part, because I didn't know that they do that different live than they do on the album. Plus, from the point of view of the artist that's hiring you to play the gig, it's always a really fantastic thing whenever somebody shows up for the first time and already knows how they play the song live. So it always pays to do a little bit of research. So learning the tune so far has been pretty easy going, but I finally reached one that is kind of kicking my ass and making me mad. And it is, of course, the song that goes with everything, Guile's theme from Street Fighter II. So this song actually has about 8 different sections in it, which is pretty crazy. And most of them start off on the same chord, which is D minor. And this is one of those things that is always really frustrating for me. Whenever a song has like a bunch of parts, but they all start off on like a different chord or whatever, it's easy to remember. Here's the G minor part, you know, here's the D minor section, whatever. But whenever songs are like this, and it has all these parts that all start off on the same chord, it makes it really hard for me to memorize. So this is the first one that I busted out some paper and a scribing tool and started making a chart for, just because I came to understand really fast that memorizing this in as little time as I have is just not going to be a possibility, so I'm going to use a chart for this one. Now, sight reading is one of those things that you don't necessarily have to be able to do to play tunes off of charts. It doesn't hurt, but it's also not required. I have limited sight reading skills. I'm not going to say I'm completely illiterate, nor am I by any means like a sight reading master or anything like that. But whenever there's like little rhythmic motifs or maybe a riff that has to be played with a certain pulse, sometimes I'll notate that stuff out, or sometimes I'll just make it in a visual language that will trigger something in my memory to help me remember how to play that part. So here's a quick look into how I go about making charts and stuff for songs. Okay, first thing in the song here is the intro. So I'm going to make a little note here that this is how the intro section goes. My sense of pitch is pretty damn good, and I've learned how to trust it through, you know, years of doing exactly what we're talking about right now. So I can usually do these just by ear, but if I'm ever in question about something, I'll pick up the instrument and fact check myself on a note here and there. So first thing in the song is a D, right? So I'm just going to write down D. After this we have B flat, followed by. So that was 2 notes in 1 measure, right? These were all just like 1 measure each, but that went G to C. So I put a little slash right there to remind myself that those 2 notes share a measure. That C is kind of on the up, you know, but I don't really need to notate that because I know I'll remember it because I know this song very well. Another D, another B flat. Those are G to C sharing a measure again, followed by another B flat. And so usually as I make a chart, I'll go through and just kind of label each section. You know, this is section 1, this is section 2. And as things progress throughout the song, I'll go through and write, you know, after you play through this, go back to section 2 and start from there, or here's a section 3 variation, that kind of thing. So now that I've got my chart made, let's give this thing a run through and see if I can read my own chart, which is pretty important. Another thing that might shock some of you guys and further explain the necessity of charts for gigs like this is the fact that we probably aren't going to get to rehearse even once before the concert, which is not uncommon at all. I've played so many gigs where you just learn the songs, chart them out, whatever, show up on stage and play them for the first time. So especially with that in mind, I'm not at all scared to be seen on stage with a couple of sheets of paper. Ain't no shame in that chart reading game. Yeah, when it comes down to the gear that I'm gonna need to play this show, I'm packing it pretty dang light this year. Eli and Matt told me that there was a backline bass amp already provided at the festival, so I'm gonna be using whatever's there, which that's one of the great things about playing bass. I really don't care. Is the amp loud enough? That's probably fine as long as you show up with a good bass, which is why I'm bringing my Sir J Classic Antique Yaz bass, because nobody ever lost a gig for showing up with a jazz bass. If you can't do it on a J, you can't do it. One thing that I always bring with me whenever I'm playing fly gigs and using backline gear is a good high quality bass preamp. That just kind of ensures I'm going to be able to get the feel and sound out of whatever amp it is that I'm using. The preamp that I've used for the past several years for almost every, you know, like rock gig that I play with Andy Wood Trio or Kennedy Wood Band or any of the cover bands or whatever that I play with, has been this Dark Glass Microtubes B7K. This thing is great and the EQ on it sweeps really wide so you can really get exactly what you want out of whatever amp it is that you're playing through. And it has a nice, like, slightly browned out, burnt sounding distortion to it that I really like that you can dial in or out. But considering that this is an all acoustic gig where I'm not trying to, you know, dirty up the low end or anything like that, I'm gonna bring along my favorite preamp for clean tones, which is the TC Electronic Spectra Drive. It also has some built-in distortion and stuff if you want it, but I never really use it because the clean tones on this are so great. It really sounds like plugging into like a really fantastic console. Plus it has a built-in compressor and stuff on there too, which is always essential for bass. And it keeps me from having to bring another pedal for separate compression. So I'm gonna bring this guy along with me. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comment section below if you'd like to see more stuff like this, because I always end up getting a handful of random gigs throughout the year with different artists and stuff. So if you guys want to see how I get prepared for other things or maybe guitar gigs or whatever, just let me know in the comment section below. If you like this video and want to support my channel, be sure to head on over to that Patreon page at patreon.com/BenEllerGuitars. You all can also follow me on Instagram at Ben Eller Guitars, and don't forget to follow the Hit Points on there as well at The Hit Points. They also have a big YouTube channel that you guys can check out and watch a bunch of cool live videos and other stuff. If you're going to be at VGM Con, be sure to catch our set on Saturday. It's going to be a ton of fun. Look forward to seeing you there. Thanks a ton for watching. I'll catch you guys later. Wish me luck. Cheers.